Hey everyone, I'm going to go ahead and work on step 3. And in this video, I'm going to go ahead and do step 4 too. So your assignment for today, Wednesday, and tomorrow, Thursday, I'm going to go ahead and model both of those for you in this video. And then you can either get this done in one sitting, or if you would like to spread it out and do the interacting with the text today and the summarizing of the text tomorrow, you have that option. Please remember, you are assigned to this extended learning time. This is your topic and your text. I am practicing and showing you how to do this with this yes to uniforms as students view, but you will actually be going through the extended learning time on your own. All right, so when we pull this up, we will see our step 1, our response, our connection response is still there. Step 2, we will see the text, and you should also see your completed questions still there. And now we are ready to go on to engage with the text, step 3. All right, so directions for today is as you analyze the text, you will be gathering evidence that will help you develop a response to the CERCA question, do school uniforms improve student learning? Our first step is to reread the article. Use aqua to highlight evidence that school uniforms are beneficial or helpful to students. Add notes that explain how school uniforms improve student learning. Use pink to highlight evidence that school uniforms create disadvantages or are sort of negative for students. Add notes that explain how school uniforms violate students' rights. Okay, so I've already read the text, but because I'm going to be looking specifically for how school uniforms are beneficial and how they create disadvantages, I'm going to take the time to reread the article again so that I can truly make sure that I get everything that I need to get. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the aqua. So the aqua, again, is beneficial to students. All right, I'm going to read this aloud, which is interesting because y'all already have school uniforms at Emma. So this is a particular student's view who is supporting uniforms, and we'll see why. There has long been debate about whether public schools can and should make school uniforms mandatory. I understand why some people are against uniforms, but I, for one, believe uniforms offer lots of benefits. My school requires all students to wear a uniform, and I support the policy. The debate over this topic probably went into full gear in 1996 when then President Bill Clinton brought the matter to widespread public awareness. In his State of the Union address that year, Clinton suggested that school uniforms might help solve problems in the country's educational system. In the 2+ decades since then, countless studies have been done in hopes of resolving the issue one way or the other. But I've never seen any studies that say academic performance improves when uniforms are not required. Okay, so far, nothing really. This is more just like introduction. So I haven't highlighted anything yet in the first 2 paragraphs. Let's see about paragraph 3. In fact, many of these studies strongly suggest that uniforms actually do help student performance and in several ways. For instance, okay, good. So I know she's getting ready to come up with an example. Some research has found that when kids wear uniforms, in-school suspensions are reduced and test scores go up. Okay, does that match the activity of highlighting evidence that school uniforms are beneficial to students? Yes. Okay, very good. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. For instance, some research has found. Oops. Okay, perfect. So I just clicked and dragged, and that is going to give my highlight. Okay, so a note that I'm going to add for myself is just better behavior and test scores, because if there are fewer in-school suspensions, that means that there's probably like better behavior and also better test score. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now it's cool because when I go over to this sidebar where it says highlights, I can click and it will give me the color and what I highlighted and my note as well. So that's pretty cool. All right, I'm going to keep on going. California's Long Beach Unified School District became the first United States public school district to require all students from kindergarten through 8th grade to wear uniforms. Researchers studied the effects of this requirement and found many improvements within the district. But those studies were criticized by some and who said the study methods were flawed, so the debate rages on. Okay, so I guess that is like all of this is technically evidence, but because they don't really say like what those improvements were, I'm going to highlight it, but I'm going to, in my note, I'm going to say that this is kind of like not the best evidence because there's no specific fact. Given. It just says that they found improvements, but they didn't really detail what kinds. So that's why I put that note. Okay. For sure, there are some seemingly reasonable arguments against making kids wear school uniforms. Still, dressing in uniform makes better sense if you ask me. Proponents say uniforms cut down on school violence. Since the 1990s, there have been a number of incidents where kids killed other kids over team jackets, athletic shoes, or designer clothing items. Schools that require uniforms simply don't allow those things on school grounds. When students don't worry about being harassed or threatened because of their clothes, they can focus more on academic achievement. Okay, so I'm definitely going to highlight this, and I'm just going to sum up this note. So this is focus on academics or schoolwork instead of fashion or appearance. Okay, I'm also just going to highlight this. I'm not going to really put a note for that though. Okay, opponents. All right, so this looks like this is probably where I'll start getting out some of my pink. Now, you can do this a couple of ways. If you want, you can read the text all the way through and just look for one part first, and then read the text through again and look for pink the second time, or look for evidence that say that uniforms create disadvantages. Now, even if you listen to this article and go through with it and read it twice, it's only going to take you about 12 minutes to read the article twice and pause your listening and reading in order to do your highlights. So I recommend going through twice just because you'll get more exposure, or you'll like read the text more. But of course, it's always up to you. That's just my suggestion. Okay, so I know that this section is going to be a pink section. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to go ahead and switch to pink and show you what I would highlight, because this is how school uniforms create disadvantages for students. Okay, opponents say school uniforms fail to stop school violence. To those who support this point of view, uniforms are nothing more than a Band-Aid. In other words, making students dress alike is a superficial remedy to the problem of violence. Okay, so does that really create a disadvantage, or does it just not really fix the problem? I'm going to mark that, but I'm just going to label that. I'm going to just leave my question in my notes. Does this actually show a disadvantage, or does it just show that uniforms aren't necessarily effective? No single policy will completely rule out violent behavior. Violence has remained a problem in schools across the country with or without uniforms. But if uniforms cut down on even a fraction of the violence, isn't that a good thing? Uniforms also cut the risk of illegal intruders on school property. Okay, so I'm actually going to go back to blue here because this is a benefit. You know who is part of the school and who isn't. Okay. All right. What are some other positive aspects of school uniforms? For one, they cut down on peer-to-peer social problems. Okay. Great. I'm actually going to highlight, okay, so I'm going to leave that. So fewer social problems. When you're in a uniform, there's no pressure to wear trendy clothes. Kids from wealthy families dress exactly the same as poor families. Okay, I think that's really important. So that like kind of shows that it creates a sense of equality. Okay. Now we're going back on to the pink here. Okay. Some opponents say that requiring school uniforms violates students' ability to express themselves. They point out that this widespread conformity stifles, that's a word, stops or prevents, okay. So widespread conformity stifles individuality and takes away certain freedoms that kids should be able to enjoy. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. And I'm going to say gets rid of freedom of expression or creativity. Now, interesting that the author goes on to say, I must respectfully disagree. There are all kinds of ways to express ourselves beyond mere fashion. For instance, maybe you're brilliant in math or science, maybe you're a painter or writer. Maybe you tell great stories or jokes. These are other forms of self-expression that don't cause social class divisions. The uniform code levels the playing field. Okay, so this looks like this is an idiom. Yep, exactly. So levels the playing field is a figurative meaning or a figurative phrase that means makes things fair by getting rid of advantages and disadvantages. So if uniforms make things fair, I would highlight that as a positive thing. Uniforms make things fair for students. Okay. So far, I'm just like looking back over, I see a lot more blue than I do pink. But what's interesting is if we look back up at the title, Yes to Uniforms, A Student's View, we already get the author's perspective or point of view in here. And we can tell that the author supports uniforms. So probably there's going to be more blue highlights or more evidence that show that uniforms are beneficial because that is what our author is trying to get us to believe. Okay. Now, so I would just finish this in terms of my highlighting. I would make sure that I have everything that I want to keep. And then my highlights will all show up over here. And again, they're color coded, so I know whether or not they are for or against school uniforms. And so I'll go back to the text, and it looks like I'm ready to go on to my summary. Step 4. Okay, so the directions for this are to summarize the selection in a few sentences. The sentence frames can help you. The sentence frames are these little sentence starter guys right over here. So because there are 1, 2, 3 sentence frames, my summary is going to be 3 sentences. And I'm just going to use these sentence starters to start my sentences, and then I will just fill in my thoughts based on what I got from reading the text, and I'll just put it all in the box. So the first sentence frame is the author of Yes to Uniforms supports a school uniform policy because, all right, so now if I don't remember or if I want to go back into the text, I can look at the highlights and my summary will still stay here. So she mentioned there's better behavior and test scores. She mentioned there's a focus on academics, cuts the risk of illegal. So this is kind of like a race response a little bit. So what I could do is just kind of, because this is just a summary, I'm just going to take like what I put in my notes. I don't need to put the actual quote in. So that's how it's different from a race response. So the author of Yes to Uniform supports a school uniform policy because uniforms may help students have better behavior, earn better test scores, and feel a sense of equality with other students. Okay, now for my second sentence frame, the author accepts some downsides to uniforms. Okay, so there are 2 blanks here, so that means I need to have 2 things. Okay, so one downside, I'm going to scroll back and look through my highlighting. Okay, is that it may not help reduce violence. Uniforms may not help reduce violence, and I'm going to look for one other, and they get rid of freedom of expression. and they get rid of students' freedom of expression and creativity. Okay, so now for my final sentence. For the author, the school uniform is a reflection of, now this is interesting, a reflection of what? So I'm going to go back to the text and I'm going to check the final paragraph because sometimes at the end of an argument, the author, if they do their argument well, will review their main points. So this is a good place for us to look. When it comes to uniforms, the advantages by far outweigh the disadvantages. There's also the question of self-esteem. Every time I put on my uniform, I feel like I'm part of something larger than myself. I take pride in my school. My uniform shows that pride. Okay, so that kind of sounds like the school uniform is a reflection of the author's sort of like feeling of belonging to the school. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in as a reflection of feeling a sense of belonging in school and being proud of the school. Okay, so that looks long, but really it's just 3 sentences. And I was able to find my fill in the blanks all from my highlights and by looking back in the text. So once you have these 4 steps done, I will be able to check your work and I'll be able to give you some feedback on your summary to make sure that you are going in the right direction before we next week start working on step 5, which is building our argument and then moving into our CERCA essay, which is really exciting. So make sure you get steps 3, engaging with the text, highlighting, and step 4, summarizing, done by the end of this week. You can break it up and do part today, part tomorrow, or you can do it all in one sitting when your highlights are fresh. So good luck. If you have questions, let me know. I think you're going to do great with this. And I'm really excited to see what y'all think about the extended learning time and what things you mark in the text and your summary of it. So get going. Keep up the good work. Proud of y'all. Love you. Miss you. And I will see you later. Thanks.